Well, welcome to this afternoon's webinar, which is all about enhancing developmental teacher observations. Today's session is an interactive workshop, and we hope you enjoy the format and also the opportunity to talk with English Australia members from around Australia. We will be recording the main segments of this webinar, but when you go out into breakout rooms, obviously we'll pause the recording, so nothing will be recorded from the breakout rooms. And we're just doing that to share it with people who couldn't come to the live session today. So we're very fortunate to have the Queensland Institute here to facilitate today's workshop. We have the co-founders and directors of the Queensland Institute, Fiona Wiebusch and Philippa Coleman, with us. And the Queensland Institute is a consultancy firm that specialises in professional development for language teaching and learning. I've had the pleasure of working on various projects and presentations with Fiona and Philippa, and I can assure you that their work is full of creativity and rigour. And I'm sure you'll enjoy today's session. So I'll hand over to you now, Fiona and Philippa.
Thank you so much, Sophie, and thank you so much for the invitation to join you and to join our colleagues back home in Ellicos for us, which is where we certainly began. So we're pleased to be with you. I'm going to share my screen and kick us off for today. Can you see the slides on screen now? Terrific. Thanks so much. So welcome everybody, to those of you who are live in the Zoom room with us here, or for those of you who are joining us later online. Thank you for making the time. We're really pleased to be here with you. As Sophie mentioned, my name is Fiona Wiebusch, and together with Philippa Coleman, we are the co-founders of the Queensland Institute, based here in beautiful Brizzy, that you can see behind me here. And we do help schools and universities to design professional development for language teaching and learning, not just here in Australia, but in 13 other countries around the world. So we're pleased to share some of those experiences with you today. I should say, of course, our topic for today is focusing on optimizing teacher observations. You've probably been observed yourself, or you are perhaps already in the role of being an observer of other teachers. And really what we wanted to share today was a bit of the behind the scenes of how we can ensure a positive and productive process for everyone involved. But Philippa and I, throughout our careers, we have been all of these things. We've been English language teachers for many years, and we still are teacher trainers, academic managers, directors of studies, CELTA teachers, Delta tutors, and we were doing some maths the other day, and we think probably privileged observers of more than 3,000 teachers. And if our maths was better, the number might be more than that. But if you are new to being in the role of observer, the first thing we want to say to you is relax. If you have been an English language teacher for a little bit of time, you already have many of the qualities that you need to be a terrific observer. You have experience in the classroom, you have a set of colleagues to turn to, you have resources to refer to. And for us, the most important thing is that you have empathy for the teaching experience. And you'll see that principle of empathy come up a lot in our session today as we move through the process. It's just a few of our team there in the pictures as well. But we'd love to hear a little bit about you. It's time to light up my chat box there. So if you can find the chat box, I'd love you to tell us your main role as you see it in your school. Are you a teacher? Are you an academic manager? Are you a trainer? And where you're joining us from. So I'm Fiona, I'm a teacher educator, and I'm in Brisbane. Let me know in the chat where you're joining us from. Sydney's on board. Gold Coast, Perth, Sydney. Scarborough Beach, beautiful. Vietnam. Sydney, Melbourne. Wow, look at that. Fantastic. Thank you so much. Lovely to see you there. And again, welcome to everyone joining us online later. It's really lovely to have you here. And looking at that list, there are academic managers, there are lots of teachers, and a real breadth of experience. So we're looking forward to you having the opportunity to share your expertise or experience a little bit later in the session. So over the course of the next 50 minutes or so, we're going to focus on teacher observations, particularly the more formal teacher observations, where you will be in a position of experienced observer, observing a teacher. And it is designed for new academic managers and lead teachers. And we hope that by the end of the session, you're feeling really comfortable to describe the main stages of the teacher observation process, particularly with reference to key resources and tips that we provide in the beginning of this session. And later, when you're in breakout rooms and in discussion, we'll be giving you some scenarios to work with to identify and discuss the features of that post-teacher observation feedback or the oral feedback session, and to really be able to explore that even further with your teaching teams. We will be providing a set of resources on a Padlet, which you are welcome to share with your colleagues. So there is going to be interaction. We do hope that you will join us and that there will be ongoing conversations when you leave the session with your teaching teams. So before we get into defining and sharing and making sure we're all on the same page about what teacher observations are, I'd love you to tell us your thoughts. We all come with some experiences and ideas, so I just want you to get that out of your systems and to share it with us. You can do that through scanning the Mentimeter on your phone, or I will also drop the link in the chat for you now. And I'll give you a moment. Let's take a minute or two to do some typing. Tell me everything you want to tell me about teacher observation. Can you see them scrolling up on the screen now, Philippa?
Yes, yes, I can.
Nice, everybody. Mixed emotions about teacher observations. That's certainly been our experience in listening to and working with lead teachers over the years, academic managers, but also important, useful opportunities for growth. Wow, well, I can't wait to get in there and have a look further at what we have to say. But I'm seeing some of those themes of it's important that it's done well. And that's really what we're going to focus on for the remainder of the session is how do we optimize the experience for everyone that we're working with, particularly for the teachers involved. So some time ago, back in 2015, actually, when Ian Aird was a director of studies, he's now the CEO of English Australia. he and our partner and a couple of other colleagues delivered a really wonderful session called Teacher Observations and the Essentials. So we don't want to reinvent the wheel. We love these definitions, so we're going to keep them and share them with you, just to make sure we're on the same page about what kind of observations we're talking about. Ian talked in general about observations involving watching any task being done for the purpose of learning and or teaching, whether it be for evidence, for appreciation, or for assessment of skills in practice. They're a really valuable part of learning and common for any practice that is not purely knowledge-based. So, for example, we always see chefs and mechanics and doctors learning by observing their peers, and of course, for us as teachers. You'll be familiar from your own experiences that there are typically three main kinds of teacher observations. There's peer observations that are typically your non-expert observers, colleagues observing colleagues, and they have learning and motivation outcomes for the teacher. So it's about getting them excited about their practice, learning new things. Of course, then there are PD observations that are more formalized. And these should be scaffolded and guiding. They often involve planned learning outcomes. So the teachers might be putting together lesson plans to share with their observer, for example. And the third kind are the quality assurance observations. And these might typically involve more criteria to refer to that relate to your institution. And they may lead to decision outcomes for the teacher, in fact. So it's really these two areas, PD observations and quality assurance observations, that the processes we're speaking about today refer to. So we won't be looking at peer observations in this session. So as Philippa and I sat down to do a bit of a search of the literature and also to think from our experience, what is it that makes the observation journey really optimal for everybody involved? And so we've come up with these 6 guiding principles from our experience. We really believe that the observation process needs to be supportive, that may be self-evident, and provide a learning opportunity for teachers and observers. Should be transparent in that everybody should know what the steps are involved and what is expected at each stage. We love a process where the observations are targeted and encourage teachers to find a focus for the lesson, giving them some agency in their lesson observation. In terms of process, we want it to be consistent. So it doesn't have to be prescriptive, but it should be an approach that is agreed on, at least for your centre, for teachers and observers, so they know what to expect each time, and they don't have a different manager and have a different process. They might have different things to say, but the process would be the same. Fundamentally, we also think the best observation processes are really ongoing, and they work best in a culture of continuing professional development. So of course, observation is not the only learning tool for professional development. So if you have peer observations happening, if you have regular sharing of resources with your teachers and lots of opportunity for teachers to observe practice in many ways, then the observation itself is often less daunting. And if we get all of those things right, then we feel the teacher observation process can be a really empowering journey. And I think for me, looking back in my early career as a DOS and observing teachers, one of the things that was one of the best pieces of feedback I received is when I walked out of the feedback session with the teacher. We'd had the oral feedback session at the end of the observation, and they said, you know, that really wasn't what I was expecting. I feel like we're in this together, actually. I was having a challenging time with my class, and now I feel like I can come and talk to you about teaching, not just about the timetable. And I said, please, I would love to talk more about teaching with you and not just the timetable. So we hope that that's the experience that you're having with your colleagues as well. And all of these things really align well with the overarching principles of effective professional development. And again, if you're new to planning professional development and observations in your centre, then this is a resource that we really recommend you have a look at, that talks about how you can ensure some of these principles are realised. in your school setting. And these links will be available to you on the Padlet at the end. So I'm going to hand over to Philippa now, who's going to reveal a little bit more about the process itself.
Yeah, thanks, Fiona. So yeah, let's drill down into the process a little bit now. And just like any great lesson, we feel that there are three main stages for observation. The pre-stage, so what teachers and observers do before a class observation. The during stage, what teachers and observers are doing during a class observation. And then finally, the post-stage, things that happen after the observation. Okay, so let's think about when now. Look at those observer actions on the left-hand side of the screen, providing feedback, clarifying the observation process. I'm going to give you about 20 seconds to think, when would you expect those things to happen during the observation process? Would it be pre, during, or post? For example, providing oral feedback. When's that going to happen? So just have a little moment and see if you can think about where those things happen. All right, thanks, Fiona. Can we go to the next slide, please? Thank you. Okay, so when do those things happen? These are some possible answers. I mean, a couple of things to note, I think, is that during the during phase, when you're observing, you're busy observing, but you're actually not really interacting. You'll probably be note-taking and looking, but not thanking the teacher, but not doing other things. The pre-stage and the post-stage is probably when you, as the observer, are doing more things. And, you know, some things you may be doing at the pre and the post stage. For example, you might offer some planning support at the pre stage, but you also might offer that as ongoing post-observation support as well. Yeah, thanks, Fiona. Okay, so now we're going to dive down a little bit into the how. How do we do this? And here are some of the top tips that we've come up with for optimizing these developmental observations. And we'll leave you with this infographic. But, you know, you've probably experienced the what and the why because you've been observed yourselves, but it's the how that no one ever really tells you. So let's focus on that now. And remember that we want to try and keep these lesson observations as supportive and as empowering as we can for the teachers. Okay, so please just take a moment and skim the infographic. Have a look at some of those things there. Okay, well, I'm just going to talk about each of these stages. So let's start with the pre-stage. And our first tip is really about communication and setting expectations. So Fiona's already mentioned this, but we think it's really, really important to clarify the observation process and set expectations with teachers so that it's transparent and everybody's going to have the same consistent experience. For example, how do you, as an observer, communicate with your teachers about an upcoming observation? What information do your teachers need? You might think about designing an email template so everybody's receiving the same message and the same information. Let's think about lesson planning. You know, do you want your teachers to write a lesson plan a la the CELTA, or just write the lesson aims? And in one school where I was working, my academic manager colleagues and I agreed that a CELTA style observation was really just too onerous. And what we really needed was just the lesson aims from teachers, and also maybe some bullet points of procedure as well as their materials, of course. So teachers will also want to know what the feedback process is. Is it oral? Is it written and oral? Will teachers need to write a reflection following the lesson? So it's really important to discuss your observation guidelines with your leadership team colleagues, and perhaps, you know, get some input from teachers so that they're fully aware of what the process is before you decide on what your guidelines will be. And then my final tip at the pre-observation stage is about planning and trying to schedule a short pre-observation meeting with teachers to offer them a bit of support. I often find that asking about their students, their class profile, can really help settle nerves. They can tell you about their students, who's talkative, who's late, who goes to sleep, etc., etc. And it's also a great chance for you and the teacher to talk about the goals of the observation, because this is for them. A developmental process observation is for them. So to clarify that area of focus, what do they want to know, learn more about? For example, I was working with a teacher once, and he explained to me that he wanted to experiment with the test-teach-test approach in his lesson. So that was really great. And establishing that focus made it personal and relevant to that team, and ensured that our observation was targeted. So let's move on to the during phase now, when I said before that you're going to be busy observing. My first tip is to remember your observer etiquette. It's going to sound crazy, but remember to smile. Don't frown. Don't get distracted by your phone. It's so off-putting. So please remember your observer etiquette. And my second suggestion for when you're observing teachers is to focus on the students, not the teacher, and to look for the positive. What's working in the lessons? So I take notes, quite detailed notes, but I don't write furiously. And I look for evidence for what my students are doing or not doing. I'm quite specific in my note taking. I note down timing, what students are doing or saying or not doing, that kind of thing. And then finally, towards the end of that process, to support myself later getting ready for feedback, I might asterisk 1 or 2 points that I think that I'm going to want to discuss with the teacher and highlight in our feedback discussion. So it helps me organize my ideas for later. And then finally, the post-discussion phase. So in my written and oral feedback, as I said before, I try to emphasize the positives with teachers. I try to limit the action points to 1 or 2 points. Less is more. Always remember that, less is more. And we want to target our feedback, referring back to our teachers' goals where possible. We want our teachers to feel inspired and empowered through this observation process, not kind of dejected and demotivated. And then finally, at the end of the oral feedback in particular, I try to assist the teachers to come up with 1 or 2 professional development goals, which highlights that their professional learning is actually ongoing. It's not just an observation hoop that we're jumping through. It's something that is an ongoing process. So yeah, you will have access to this on the Padlet, and Fiona's going to run you through that now. Thanks, Fiona. You have to unmute, Fiona.
Thank you very much. Sorry, I have some drilling going on here, so I'm just being a little mindful. So all the resources that we share today are available to you really because we want you to share them with your teaching peers who you work on in your leadership teams, and really as a springboard for your ongoing discussions. So with that in mind, I'm going to share the Padlet with you now that has all of these things. Don't worry, you don't have to do too much just yet. But I would like you to do one thing on the Padlet. If you look in the Zoom chat now, you'll see a link. And you'll also need a password, which is observations. I'd love you to come and find this pink entry ticket to tell me that you've arrived in the Padlet. And just come and pop your name, say hello, hi, it's Fiona here in the comment. I'll give you a moment to do that. Great. Okay, Patty. Hi, Connie. Hi, Manju. Mayu, maybe. Wonderful. So there you go. I can see that everyone's entering in here. So just know that that's all there for you at the end of the day. So you'll notice what I was sharing with you here from Philippa, the top tips is there for you as well, and other things if you want to come back and check our presentation later, it's here for you also. All right. So you might want to keep that tab near you, but I'll invite you to come and join me back on my screen now. Because I think for any academic manager or person stepping into the role of observer, I know this was the case for me, it's that post-observation feedback session that was the most daunting initially. I wasn't sure what I was supposed to say or necessarily what I had to do or what I had to prepare. So I learned over the years and in discussion with senior colleagues that I actually should attend to those three things before I head into the observation session. So when I was in the role of observer, I would think about what I would prepare. I'd be organizing my notes, collating resources that I might take in to share, formulating my comments into questions, making sure I've got a comfortable space, lots of those behind the scenes tips that Philippa mentioned with you earlier. But the main thing I was concerned about was what do I say and what if I get it wrong? So I don't want you to get caught up in what not to say in the observation, post-observation feedback when you are in the role of observer. A tip that I learned for myself to check when I was planning and thinking about what I would say is to ask myself, as a teacher, how would it feel to hear this? So I've got a few sentences here and I'd love you to tell me in the chat. We'll go one by one. Does it feel okay to hear if you were the teacher, or are you starting to feel a bit uncomfortable? You can just write un for uncomfortable if you like, a bit quicker. So if I said, I really like the way that you set up the speaking task, how does that feel to hear as a teacher? Okay, uncomfortable? Yep, we're all okay with that. Well, the speaking activity number 2, speaking activity didn't go well today. How are we feeling? Yeah, a little bit some frowns. Okay. It's a little affronting, isn't it? What about this? 3 students were confused about how to approach the speaking task today. How does that feel? mixed feelings there. I mean, it's never nice to hear that something didn't work, but I think what's important to note here is that we said 3 students, not the entire class, was confused about how to approach the speaking task. So that's why when Philippa mentioned earlier, she takes quite specific notes and is watching what the students are doing. It's good to frame it so that we're not overgeneralizing in our comments with teachers. So the 4th one here, for example, I understand how frustrating it is when students don't achieve the task in the way that we'd hoped. How are you feeling as the teacher? Good. We're okay. So it's okay to acknowledge things didn't go well, and to share your empathy. I understand how that feels, and to name it. I think that's a good thing to do. And number 5, one thing that's worked well for me is I start to script my instructions if I'm feeling a bit uncertain about how to set up the task. Yeah, we're okay. So it is okay to bring in stories and anecdotes from your own experience with the teachers. It doesn't have to be a particular resource or another complete alternative activity, but just sharing with them, you've been there too, and here's one thing that you tried. I found that particularly helpful in the scenarios where I thought, well, I'm not actually an expert in this area, but here's one thing I have tried and it has worked well for me. So keeping that honesty, the empathy, sharing your experience, and acknowledging that you're learning too, but you're in it together. The other thing I used to be concerned about was, gosh, I just saw so much in that lesson. How on earth am I going to narrow it down here? So I wanted to give you a heads up for newer academic managers that these are some hot topics, if you like, of things that we see in observations. Often the strengths are in classroom rapport, there's good learner engagement, teachers are great at establishing context. We get this in our CELTA, the logical staging, we're pretty good. Language grading can be hit and miss, but usually okay. Pretty good at incorporating technologies these days, particularly post-COVID. But areas to improve that without fail over many years and thousands of teachers, we're often seeing lesson names are hard to observe in action in class. That may be because they're poorly defined, or it may be because they haven't been set out in a way that the observer can see. That's why a conversation can help prior to the session. Giving instructions, concept checking. We might be seeing teachers teaching skills, reading, writing, listening, speaking, but then not being sure about how to give feedback to develop those skills further. So monitoring strategies, giving feedback. And the old classic, still true for me too, is ambitious timing in the lesson plan, of course. So just a heads up for our colleagues. So with those things in mind, thinking about how we give post-observation and what we prepare, what we do and what we say, we have a few scenarios now. We want to throw you in to your role of observer. So I'm going to hand you over to Philippa to set up our breakout room discussion task.
Okay, thanks, Fiona. So yes, we're going to set up a discussion task for you and note-taking task for you now in breakout rooms. So we have written 3 typical scenarios. Things based on our experience are often what we see when we're doing observations. And your group is going to discuss one of these scenarios, okay, and make some notes on a Jamboard. I wonder if you can tell me in the chat, are you familiar with Jamboard? Yes, no, yes, no, yes, no. Who's used Jamboard before? Yes, no, yes, no. Let's see what. Okay. All right. So again, some mixes here. Okay. So if you've got familiarity with Jamboard, you might be taking the lead in your breakout room. Okay. It's a whiteboard. It's a note-taking tool. Okay.
Would you like to share your screen now, Philippa?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Okay. Okay. So you can see my screen now, I think. Is that correct? Yeah. So we're going to get you to come back to the Padlet where you were before and scroll along the bottom until you come to the activities column. And this is where we're going to find the instructions to the task. So scroll down using the bar, part 1, part 2, the top tips that I talked about, and now we're on this pink post, part 4, group work. So I'm just going to share my screen with you, and you're going to have 10 minutes for this activity. And when you first go to your breakout room, please introduce yourself and say where you're from and what your role is at your institution. I want you to select a timekeeper to keep things moving and a scribe who's probably going to share their screen in the breakout room and also type the group's notes and answers. So again, choose the person who's got familiarity with Jamboard. It's going to make things a lot quicker there. Read your scenario that we give you about observations and a teacher observation. Identify the issue that happened during this observation, or sometimes there might be a couple of issues, and add some sticky notes to your Jamboard to prepare what you're going to, add some sticky notes to your Jamboard to prepare your feedback, what you're going to do and what you're going to say, just as Fiona's set up with you there. Okay. So how do you access your Jamboards? Well, the links will be here. As I mentioned, people in room 1, 2, and 3 will discuss scenario A. People in rooms 4, 5, and 6, scenario B. Rooms 7, 8, and 9, scenario C. And so what you can do is when you go to the breakout room is please remember your room number. The Jamboard is going to look a little bit like this. Okay, so this is your Jamboard. I'm just going to go back to the beginning. Scenario A. So there are some instructions if you're not sure how to use Jamboard. But what you're going to do is you're going to use this button here to scroll through to get to your room number. So this is room A, for example. This is room A.
Room 1. Yeah.
Sorry, I beg your pardon. Thank you. Scenario A, room 1. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. So this is room 1. And then you click on the button. If you're room 2, you've got to go there. And if you're room 3, you've got to go there. So by clicking on that little arrow at the top. All right then. Okay, so as you know, all good teachers ask instruction checking questions before the students do the activity. So in your breakout room, how long do you have for this activity? 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 3 minutes? How long do you have? Bravo, Kelly, 10 minutes. Thank you very much. You've got 10 minutes. And where will you find the links for your Jamboard? Where will you find them? Someone unmute and tell me.
In Padlet.
Yeah, in the Padlet, exactly, in the activities column, and you'll find the link. Okay, and how many scenarios is your group going to talk about? 3, 2, or 1? Ah, Kelly, yes, 1. Okay.
One there.
There's only 1 there. All right then, so remember your room number. Fiona's going to open the breakout rooms. Remember your room number and we'll see you in 10 minutes. Okay, have fun chatting, everyone.
Quick tip, there's about 6 or 7 of you in each room, so keep the intros fairly brief. We'll see you soon.
I think I was speaking with mute.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back. Welcome back. That was really terrific to see you all really engaging with that task in the breakout room. I'll share my screen again. Let's have a quick think about it. Time is against us, I'm afraid. So I'm just going to go through one of these scenarios very quickly. Let's have a look at scenario A, for example. Bella, who's the novice teacher, has difficulties with setting up instructions, but she recognises that in the feedback and is wondering, you know, what she can do because she knows that her own instructions impacted on the student's success in that task. So we've got some lovely ideas here, you know, task setup, ICQs. Yes, that was the issue with this particular one. You know, people are talking about sharing typical strengths and areas to improve to get the teacher thinking before the lesson. Ask questions to help the teacher reflect. Yes, you might want to prepare those kinds of questions before you go into the feedback stage because it's really hard to think of them on the spot. We've also got things like, you know, yeah, the issues and ask Bella what to do, blah, blah, blah. And then if you notice that you come through to the scenario and it says, stop, when you're ready, reveal some answers. So this will be the same with each of the Jamboards, and we don't have time to go through those. So this, for example, is you can remove the stickers and you can see what was the issue, suggestions at what to prepare, what to do, and what to say. Now, these are not the only way or the correct way or the right way. This is one way that you might think to approach that. So please feel free to go back to the Jamboards and have a look at what other groups wrote, and also have a look at Fiona's and my suggested answers. Okay, just going to pass back to you now, Fiona.
Sure. First of all, I have to say they were pretty hectic, but pretty helpful breakout rooms going on. So well done. What fantastic leadership in your rooms of cracking on and having a go. It's always disappointing when you don't have enough time to finish every aspect of the task, but I hope that you can appreciate all the resources are there now for you to have a look at. And, you know, there's some blank copies here for those of you who are academic managers. And if you found this helpful yourself, that it could even be something that you go through with your teams and tweak and use if you'd like to. Can you see the slides on my screen now?
Mm-hmm.
Terrific. So as we come to the last few minutes of the session, I really just wanted to send out a reminder, particularly to our new colleagues joining us as academic managers and lead teachers. You know, you had a beautiful room full of people here who do this, but also there are lots of resources available to support. You do have the experience as a teacher to draw on. You do have the empathy. I saw it in action in your rooms and in your comments to Bella and Jackie and to Asha in those case scenarios. Ian and Aparna and Juanita's webinar is there. The tricky one about instructions, I have a webinar with Rufus James there that I would highly recommend to share with particularly a novice teacher if they were struggling with instructions. British Council has some terrific templates for the checklists themselves or lesson plan templates and things of what to say and do as well. And also just, I'd really recommend to you our colleagues Sandra and Kelly from Circular Learning have a new platform, the Learning Circle. It has some terrific bite-sized micro PD, particularly if you've got new teachers like Bella's scenario joining EAP for the first time. There's a lovely little course there that you could refer them to. So again, all of those resources are available to you on our Padlet. Sophie will share the links and things with you leaving the session. And as always, we would love to hear from you. We know there's interest. There's been a lot of people in the session today and more on the waiting list. So if you do have an opportunity to share some feedback with us, we'd love you to do so and to tell us what was useful, what were your takeaways, what would you like to know more about. that will help us in building sessions potentially for the future. And of course, you're very welcome to get in touch with Philippa and myself directly. We do consult and work with centres, and we'd be really happy to support you in your journey. So we hope that we can keep the conversation going. We do have a few minutes for Q&A, and Philippa and I are certainly able to stay on the line. But we'd also just like to say thank you for being so open and willing to participate with your colleagues. And we hope that this has given you a nice taste of some things to continue the discussion further about optimal processes for teacher observations. So thank you, everybody.